Okay, here we are on the last of the assembly portions. So this is what we need to do, is we now need to attach a piece of wire. This is the 25 thou wire. I've cut it to a length longer than I'm going to need. In fact, I'm going to have to trim this afterwards on the above the layout. And that's perfectly fine. I'd rather have too much wire than not enough. In this case here, make sure you're using a good pair of cutters. These cutters here are very strong. They'll cut the steel wire no problem. Don't use your rail nips or flush cutting pliers that you may have for cutting your track rail. You'll damage it with this wire. This wire is much tougher and will actually put marks into your cutter and destroy it. So make sure you use a good pair of cutters when you're doing this. First thing we want to do is we want to be able to guide it down through here. And that's our guide that we put in our plastic pivot point. And it fits through one of the number 67 holes in our brass piece. And it actually fits in the center one. So what we have here now is we have this piece here, and we have the two holes that were put in there side by side when we started. They're about 1/8 of an inch apart. They can vary a little bit. It's up to you. But what we want to do is we want to add a little hook to the end of this wire, because what happens is when we sit it in our layout, the wire wants to fall out the bottom. Now you probably can't see that too well on the video, but it's doing that. It's trying to fall out the bottom, and here it is here. So what we want to do is we want to hook it through this brass piece so we don't lose the wire. So I'm just going to sit that aside for a moment, and I'm going to take a small pair of needle nose pliers. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take myself a very small end of it, and I'm going to bend it 90 degrees. When I've bent that roughly 90 degrees, in fact that's a little bit more, there we go. Now I'm going to create myself a small squared off hook. What I want it to be is the width of these two apart. So I'm going to go approximately to that. I'm going to take my guess right about there. And I've now created a small square hook. You may or may not be able to see that very well. It's very hard to see, but it's just a small square hook. I'm now going to insert that wire through the center hole on my bracket, through the center guide, let it drop to the bottom, and we're pretty close to fitting in there. In fact, I can just take my needle nose pliers, I can bend it slightly to fit. There it is. And I'm just going to use it to push it down flat. So that's what I've done, is I've actually brought that in, and I've got that little piece of wire sitting in there nice and flat. What happens on this side now is that I actually have that little bit of a tail sticking up. If I leave it like that, eventually it'll work itself loose. It would work itself loose, and we don't want that to happen. We don't want it to fall out over the layout. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to take my needle nose pliers, and I'm going to turn this around so I can see it, and I'm going to bend the end of it over. Now it doesn't have to be totally flat, it just has to be bent and caught. So that's all I've done here, is I've actually bent that little piece over a little bit. Now my wire can't move up or down in here. It's in there permanently fixed. If I had to change this out on the layout, I'd end up cutting it, scrap this bottom piece, and cut a new wire. Not a big deal. And again, we can see that it moves, and our wire pivots from side to side. And that's exactly what we want to have happen. We want that nice smooth movement. Okay, so that's all there is to installing the wire, and that takes care of step 4. Just make sure you cut it long enough. In this case here, it's fairly long. It ends way up here where my finger is. And I can trim that down using a good pair of cutters, not a pair of rail nips. Okay?